So trust in the world around us is an interesting concept at the moment because it has turned totally upside down. The first thing is that we cannot believe what we are seeing on social media anymore, which is quite a frightening thing because the majority of people gather their news from social media these days. And it definitely is shaping the political and economic environment in which we live and work. If you want to take a look at something close to home for us, was the whole Brexit scenario and what happened there. There was massive use of social media during the whole debate that led up to the vote, and we were inundated with messages about how Brexit would be a positive thing. Afterwards, I'm not saying it was the only thing that swung the vote, but it was discovered that there were probably about 13,000 bots that were making sure that this kind of information was trending. Again, it's not an example of fake news. It's keeping something in front of you so that you start believing it eventually. In previous years, we would have been unkind and we would have called it brainwashing. There were social experiments done at one stage where while you were watching a TV program, they would flash a picture of something like a glass of Coca-Cola or something like that, and then they would see when people stopped watching, the first thing they went and bought some Coca-Cola. It's kind of a subtle kind of brainwashing, so very definitely our thoughts are being shaped now. We are being led what to think, which is a frightening thing for especially a society like ours, which prides itself on free thought, that we think for ourselves and we have a free environment in which to live. So this is a big part of the environment in which we're living in. So when we are talking about news that we can trust, content that we can trust, it should be something that's really close to heart for everybody, because you don't want to be tricked. You want to be streetwise when you are working and living on the information superhighway, and how are you going to do that if you cannot believe anything? So for me, that's one of the fundamental concepts of why we need to do what we do with digital signatures, positive identity, and crypto as a foundation element of creating digital trust. Mike, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still reeling. I haven't heard someone refer to the internet as the information superhighway in some considerable years. But setting that aside, it's definitely an interesting concept. When you think about trust, conceptualize what trust is. Is it a referral from a friend, a favorable review, and even those are subject to the person that is doing the review or doing the referring, a reputable brand, a reputable news outlet, even down to people fundamentally trusting the government for the country in which they inhabit. It's relatively easy, it's easier in the physical world, right? We can visit an office, we can see someone's physical ID, we can see that they are in a building that represents a brand or an organization or a government. Those are quite difficult things to fake. Not impossible, but they're very elaborate fakes when they are taking place. But when we spend so much of our lives in the digital world, we're making this recording online, the majority of people are working from home, they're highly distributed. Set the pandemic aside, you've got people working from coffee shops, from airport departure lounges, bus terminuses, everyone's on the go, right? And so how we all consume our news, social media, we're shopping online, there's things that track our behaviors on the internet, and with voice activated devices in throughout our home, there is an element of listening going on. And with that in mind, you bring into this big data, and so your every step of the way in your electronic world is tracked, and you've got ads that are played back to you and news things that might interest you from the ether, and they may not necessarily be true. They may be something that's tracking you online and giving you false information. So it does really get to the heart of what we do, as you say, Maeson, making sure that something is authentic, so that when you follow a link, follow a URL, open a website and navigate to something you're going to buy, some news you're going to consume, that the information is real and not something that's been created by artificial intelligence or a fraudster and then just played at you so you believe whatever it is that's there. So yeah, definitely what we do is proving authenticity of information from source so that you can trust what it is that you're reading, seeing, or watching.
When the question gets to what do you do about this environment that we were talking about, that really is the question. And it's not that easy. You have to introduce technical mechanisms that are tangible, which means that you can actually see and you can tell that something is authentic, because on its own, the messages, you can try and be clever about it. You can look who the sender is, but it might be such a good fake that you can't actually tell, So we advocate that you use some of the mechanisms like a digital signature on an email or a digital signature on a document. But the reason is that it's a tangible indicator of trust that you can check. And that actually is the concept of zero trust, is that you're going to assume that anything that comes in is not trustworthy until you have checked. It's as simple as that. You're just going to verify before you believe. And I think that's a very good and it's a very positive habit. If you do not do that, then you open yourself to untold harm, out there. That you have to have a personal strategy, you have to have a business strategy. And this is one of the best ones we have, coupled with technology that really works in the form of crypto-based identity, crypto-based digital signatures. Mike, was that a lucid intro to the topic?
I think it was great. I mean, we're focusing and really zeroing on what is zero trust in a digital world, right? And we often talk about the use of strong cryptographically secure digital identity, which to you and I means a great deal. But I like an analogy. So I mean, we've been practicing zero trust in the physical world for decades. I can't, or none of us, no one on the face of the planet can just walk into a bank and open a bank account just on me saying, hi, I'm Mike Hathaway, my date of birth is X, my address is Y. Why? Zero trust. That's not going to be trusted. In order for me to get anywhere, open a bank account, savings account, become gainfully employed, I have to prove I am who I say I am. And the only way I can do that is with providing additional credentials to support my identity. So that's a driver's license, it's a passport, birth certificate, national identity document, proof of residency, proof of address. Take that forward into the digital world. Your cryptographically secured digital identity is likened 100% to your passport. It's got some biographical information that positions who you are, your first name, last name, email address, there's a serial number. Same is true for a digital identity. It's issued by a trusted authority, similar to your passport, coming from a government passport issuing authority. Your digital identity comes from an organization or a government or a trust service providers issuing CA. So you can liken what we're doing in the digital world very closely to what we've been doing in the physical world for the last several decades. So they are very intrinsically linked, but they are nice parallels that you can draw for someone who doesn't really understand what a digital identity is when you kind of get into the technical realms.
And it's something that can be applied to everything, and it actually needs to be. You can see images these days that are created with AI, systems like DALL-E, which are so convincing, they're so realistic, they're just being created by somebody, So you need to have some sort of mechanism of trust. You've got to have your strategy, which is, I am going to verify this, I am going to check, I'll not forget about it. And then you have to put the right tools in place. And it really is an obligation of businesses and government to do more than just have a policy. You've got to actually implement the tools so that your people are safe, and it is cost effective to do. It is standards based, there's no risk. These things have been around for years and years, but we really are at the point that you have to implement at all levels. It's not just at the people interaction, it's also when servers talk to each other. A server can't just give information to an API and expect the API to receive it and believe it. Because it could be a malicious injection of code that could be coming in there, So even at a code level, at a data level, you should have this concept of zero trust. Who is it? Can I verify it cryptographically? Has the payload been changed? Can I verify the digital signature to make sure it is as it was sent originally, So these fundamental concepts really build an immune system for our internet-based systems and our electronic systems today, which is quite exciting that we have this there already, tried and tested.
Yeah, I think the device ID or devices, applications, essentially non-human entities are a really critical point because they outnumber us many thousands to one. If you look at an average business, say with 10,000 employees, that's instantly 10,000 laptops, potentially 10,000 mobile devices, never mind the number of applications and physical pieces of hardware that we interact with, wireless access points, switching, routers, servers, applications. They outnumber us many thousands to one. And in particular with device, it plays very well into a secure supply chain. So when a device is manufactured, the device manufacturer can embed a unique cryptographic credential for that device and provide to you out of band the mechanism to trust that device. So you can then, when it plugs in, connects to your corporate network, you have a means of automatically trusting it, because otherwise you're just plugging in some device that arrived in a box on a pallet, and you've got no idea where it actually originated from. So secure supply chain, secure software manufacturer, all plays into this zero trust world. A user, I can provide documents to prove my identity, but in a situation where I'm outnumbered many thousands to one, you need to have automated means to provide zero trust, or at least prove authenticity to eliminate zero trust.
So quite often when we start talking about data privacy, from a technical side, we'll immediately jump into encryption, or on the other side, you're going to jump into policy, what is GDPR saying and all these things to make it do. But I think the beauty of it is it's something that affects us personally, and there's a common sense approach that must happen, exactly like we were talking about being streetwise when it comes to believing something that's fake. When it comes to personal information that you are accepting or processing, the first thing that you need to do is you've got to make sure whose is it and have they actually given it to me. It's as simple as that. It's a very simple rule. So it actually starts in exactly the same way as when you're believing any other kinds of messages. Can I strongly authenticate the party that is giving me this information, and have they agreed to give the information? Or is somebody stealing the information and giving it to me and I'm not going to check? So again, you've got to have this zero trust approach when you're handling personal information as a foundation element. It's exactly the same. You have to see, has the person agreed that I process the information? Have they agreed to give this information? And that's the perfect place, again, to get them to apply an electronic or preferably a cryptographic digital signature, so that you can make sure that it really is them and what did they agree to, and you can keep this as a record to say, if ever there's an inquiry about this, I know exactly what happened. And I think that's how the two topics actually tie up so neatly. But it's the common sense rule. It's not something that a law is actually making us do, because we should want to approach it like this.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, when we talk about data privacy in conjunction with zero trust, I think it goes both ways. I mean, Maeson, you talk about it from the organization standpoint, making sure that I'm processing correctly, I'm storing only what I need to, but zero trust and common sense flows in the opposite direction when you're a consumer and when you're an employee. Probably more so when you're a consumer. You need to have your street smarts about you and make sure that you're only giving information to a legitimate organization. So that zero trust flows in the opposite direction. You've got to make sure that you're not providing your information into a fake government portal or a fake financial institution, in order to make sure that your data is not harvested by a fraudster or some criminal. So providing the minimal amount of information only to trusted sources, and making sure that you are checking, it sounds silly, but the URL in the address bar. If you're clicking on the link, hover over it and make sure that it's a legitimate website that you're going to, with no misspelling, the usual mechanisms to protect yourselves. And always, always, always assume zero trust. If you're not sure, go directly to the organization or government's website yourself. Call via a known telephone number to make sure that the email that you've received to collect this information is genuine. And then when you kind of look at the information that you're providing, I mean, so many people are reluctant to provide personal information to gain access to, say, a government identity, because they may not necessarily trust the government and the mechanisms that are being used to protect that information. But all of us are so ready to fall over ourselves to provide personal information to loyalty schemes to give us discount on purchases that we're making. when you think about it, under the covers, those organizations are taking that data and potentially making it available to their supply chain, to third parties, which is where you then get emails that were unsolicited in the first place asking you for more information. So it does become something of a circular thing that you need to consider when providing information to someone that you may trust or someone that may be pretending to be somebody else. So zero trust, definitely from an organizational standpoint, is important, but it's even more critical when you're a consumer out there providing information to gain access to business or consumer-based services.
The dark side is very possible. Major things can go wrong with remote work, and companies can experience fraud and attacks and all kinds of things. But let's be honest, is we all enjoy the flexibility of the world that has been created now post-COVID. The fact that remote work is here to stay, not the whole time. Flexible work environments, you can work from home part of the time, you will go into the office part of the time. But it's a great way of blending your life so that you got some flexibility, and occasionally you don't have the travel time. So it's a fantastic thing, and I think at all levels of business people want that to stay. When you realize that this is a positive thing, and in many cases it improves productivity, it improves quality of life for people if they have this flexibility, then you have to put some checks and balances in place to make sure that your business is still safe as well. It's logically flowing out from wanting to carry on working this way. So some things, protections that we had, for example, when we were coming into the office, is we used to have a whole lot of paperwork, forms that you would actually sign off something. So if you made yourself accountable for it, then business would be safer and business would flow more safely. When in a very short period of time, people moved out of the offices, many businesses lost those control mechanisms. So good governance in a business means you must put these control mechanisms back. It's vital for the business, and it's also vital for the people. When you are accountable for something, then other people can trust that you are putting forward. So a very similar concept, zero trust again. We should have mechanisms like digital signatures in our forms and in our transactions in business, because that gives you these tangible indicators of trust that business can actually flow safely. In turn, that makes the way we are working now, remote work, flexible working, it makes it sustainable for us. The environmental and social benefits for this are massive. We are reducing paperwork already. We are reducing travel and emissions and all these things, so everything is positive. We just got to take the little step and just put some control mechanisms back in place again around identity, around accountability, and around what is it that you actually agree to, as we've been speaking the whole time, and that makes it a very positive way to work.
Definitely, because we are all distributed, and I think the benefits of remote working have brought with it a few things beyond the conveniences that we have. So I'm relatively close to the office. I've got a 1 hour commute, so for me getting in once a week really isn't that difficult. Once, twice, 3 times a week, and as Maeson says, the checks and balances that would impact me if I had to go and physically sign something aren't actually that terrible. For sure I can sign something, but when we look at this recording and the way we're all positioned to the London office for Ascertia, one of us is in London, one of us is in South Africa, and the other is in Spain. So in order for us to sign an agreement, it's impossible. Why would you waste time? Why waste emissions getting together in a meeting to sign a document? So it stands to reason that those benefits of remote working should absolutely leverage the digitization initiatives that have kind of come to bear over the course of the last couple of decades. So yeah, we all need to sign something, not a problem. We pop it into Signing Hub, begin a workflow, and within minutes, we've all signed an agreement, we've all signed an NDA, a contract, whatever it is that we need to deal with electronically. So yeah, sure, there's plenty of benefits and conveniences of working from home, but we're able to pull from a much larger, greater selection of talent and resources globally to be able to fulfill our needs. That's a massive bonus on top of the conveniences of remote working and working from home, as far as I'm concerned. I can go on a business trip, I can remain connected and continue to be productive. Yes, you've got the inconvenience of the element of travel for that business trip, but fundamentally I can remain connected and do my job at the end of the day. So yes, there's conveniences, but connecting people globally for organization, I think is a wonderful upshot of remote working as far as I'm concerned.
And there's a great benefit in getting things right the first time as well, so to touch briefly on the dark side of what can go wrong in an environment, you've got things like procurement fraud, where a signature could be forged in order to pay a supplier, for example, or a supplier could send in new banking details, which gets paid, and it gets processed by somebody that has got supervisor rights on your system, but you can't see who it was, So some of these aspects can be absolutely remediated by implementing something like a digital signature, a strong digital signature, because only the party that has the private key will be able to create the signature. Therefore, only them would be able to sign off their transaction. And the system is going to have, you've got the words, have a zero trust approach. So the system is actually going to check the signature before it processes the payment. That is such a simple thing to embed in your systems. We've seen at a government level, some spectacular crimes that have been committed, where something would happen in a country like a baby being born, registered on the government identity management system, and an administrator logs on and changes the age of the child by 30 years. So in real life, their child is 1 day old, but on the system, the child is 30 years and 1 day old, and you can reprint a birth certificate. So if somebody gets hold of that reprinted birth certificate, they can go and apply for a passport, and you can immediately see the benefits to criminal and terrorist organizations by a mechanism like this. So policy alone and network security alone cannot fix this, because there could be an insider compromise as well. What you need to do is identify every individual and get them to sign the integrity and of information, and also make themselves accountable for what they're doing. And you stop it before it even starts, which is the beauty of the technology. You can stop things before it even starts.
With remote working and being in the office, there's definitely physical and mental aspects to security posture, right? So if we go to our office, one, we have to travel. That's not so much part of it, but we're going to a building. We're passing through a security gate that only we have security passes for. There's a guard on the outside of the building. We're going to our office, where again, we're badging into the room where we work as individuals. And 9 times out of 10, you would use a credential on your card to log onto your computer. And you remove that card, you go away from your desk. There's security controls in place to make sure the machine locks. If you leave your desk, it's in a guarded building behind an anti-passback mechanism. That means no one in the communal areas can get access to your machine. If you're working from home, yes, there's convenience, you're relaxed, you're in your home environment. Your security posture as a person being at home is significantly different to that of being in the office. I've had breakfast downstairs with my family. They've gone to work, they've gone to school. I've come upstairs to my home office. I've logged onto my computer. I'm coming and going, getting coffee, drinks. I'm not thinking to, take my pass with me. I'm not thinking to lock my workstation. So the way you behave at home is significantly different to how you would in the office. And think about it from the employer's perspective. The extension of their network is no longer the perimeter of the building where they operate. It's now the residence of each and every individual that's working for them. So they're reliant a lot on how you set up your IT at home, which is great for me, for Maeson and our engineers, because we're dealing with that kind of stuff all the day. But think of the people that work in the non-technical parts of the organizations, and I'm not going to belittle anybody here, but we all get an internet router. How many people, when they plug it in, turn it on, change the default password? They buy a home security camera. Do they change the default password there? They buy a smart speaker, a smart device. Those things are listening all the time. So that security posture from the enterprise shifts significantly when it's in somebody's home. So, there's a long laundry list of things you can produce if you want to consider the dark side of remote working. So the use of the smart card to get into your PC and access the VPN. As Maeson said earlier, something you have, something you know. Smart card and PIN or two-factor authentication. The use of enterprise mobility management systems. So if a device is stolen from the home, you can remote erase it and protect a working environment. But yeah, I mean, that footprint and mental shift of being in the office where you've got lots of physical and compensating controls versus being at home should never be underestimated.
And even worse, it could be a coffee shop. Yeah, so definitely, I think businesses are sometimes daunted by actually implementing zero trust at a data level in order to fix some of these things. So the concept of typing in a password before you do your work for the day, it doesn't have to be like this. You can, for certain actions on a system, you can ask for a digital signature, which in turn would ask the individual to type in their PIN or biometrically authenticated to release the digital signature. So at certain points in time for sensitive transactions, you can drastically increase the security awareness, the level of security by asking for a digital signature for the information that's being provided or the transaction that's being approved. It's not a difficult thing to do. You can even, without changing the back-end system, you can even apply 2 factors of authentication from 2 different people. If you're asking for 2 different digital signatures on a transaction, when the transaction is complete, the system processes like it always would have. So you're actually changing the authorization level by asking for digital signatures up front. Once they're there, you give the system what it always had. So you can use this to strengthen even legacy systems. It's just a different way of thinking, and it'll definitely deliver value to any business that follows this train of thought. I think maybe the last thing, just in summary, was if you think of this whole conversation, it actually fundamentally should be part of an ESG strategy for a company as well. We've talked about some things that affect the environment, the fact that digitization, digital signatures are actually very positive for the environment. We've talked about things that are social and looking after your people that work for you, as well as the community around you that you do business with. And we've talked a bit about governance, where these control mechanisms that are provided via zero trust actually assist with the governance of a company, making safer business and lower risk. So hopefully this conversation slots in various places into organizations, helping them save money, do better business. Also part of their responsibility in terms of ESG, very definitely. It should be seen as a positive thing for all the individuals that focus on this.